Ah, the Lannisters, twisted as they are some of George's very best characters. And their POV chapters are some of George's very best writing. Again, twisted as they are. Or maybe because of that. But all that deviance starts with Lann the Clever, of course, who is one of George's most twisted mythical heroes that he's created for the story. Lann is the founding hero, quote unquote, of House Lannister, but he's also a usurper who winkled the rock from the Casterlys, who have their own founding hero, Corlos, son of Caster, huntsman, lion slayer, lion cub sparer, and gold miner, whom we discussed in last week's video, which is actually the first part of this video, so hopefully you've watched that already. If you didn't, I would actually recommend hitting pause on this one. Hitting pause on this one and going back and watching that one first for the very best viewing experience. So the very, very short version is that Corlos, son of Casterly, was shown the vein of gold in Casterly Rock by the old gods, who took favor on his sparing of the lion cub, and who were watching because there's a giant weirwood in the main grotto of Casterly Rock. And it seems that the descendants of Corlos became skin changers at some point by interbreeding with the children of the forest whom they found there, just as many, many other First Men houses appear to have interbred with the children of the forest, or even the green men. It turns out there are tales of children of the forest living in the caves at the base of Casterly Rock, along with bears and lions whom they were said to skin change. And as I mentioned a moment ago, it also turns out that some of those Lann the Clever myths make a lot more sense if they originally belonged to the Casterlys. And here I'm talking about specifically the two legends of Lann having originated with a child of Garth the Green, either Rowan Goldtree, because the Lannisters have golden hair, or Floris the Fox, because the Lannisters are clever. Now, I do think Lann is definitely from the East. That's kind of the main thing about his story. And I think these Green Man ties are really about the Casterlys, who again would have been first men and who would have been the first people to meet these children of the forest living in the caves. That in turn led us to lion skin changer theory. So again, check that video out if you didn't already, but those are the ideas we'll be building on today. And in this video today, we're going to cover all the other Lann mythology, including its many ties to the tricksy Lannisters of the main story. We're certainly going to tackle the main Lann the Clever origin story, which is that he is an early Andal. And even though I famously do not subscribe to any sort of earlier than we thought Andal theory, ancient Andals theory, if you will, I do think there's quite a lot of evidence that some Andals did come early and that Lann may have been one of those early adventurers. And of course, the other main theory about Lann coming from the East, if he's not an Andal, then he must have come from the great empire of the Dawn. And I'm not just saying that because that's my brand. It's just the obvious other point of origin for someone who's coming to Westeros in the Dawn Age with golden hair and potentially magic powers. And according to Great Empire of the Dawn theory, Casterly Rock is virtually surrounded, I say, by immigrants from the Great Empire of the Dawn. There's a bunch of them on the Iron Islands, pretty much all the descendants of the Great King. And as we all know, Starfall and Old Town are virtual bastions of Great Empire of the Dawn lineage. Again, if Great Empire of the Dawn theory is correct. So with that said, I'm David Lightbringer. Thanks very much for clicking on my Lann the Clever video. Do leave a comment if you enjoy the video and a thumbs up, and let's get this started. Okay, so who's ready for some winkling? The precise method by which he accomplished this remains a matter of conjecture. In the most common version of the tale, Lann discovered a secret way inside the rock, a cleft so narrow that he had to strip off his clothes and coat himself with butter in order to squeeze through. Once inside, however, he began to work his mischief, whispering threats in the ears of sleeping Casterlys, howling from the darkness like a demon, stealing treasures from one brother to plant in the bedchamber of another, rigging sundry snares and deadfalls. By such methods, he set the Casterlys at odds with one another and convinced them the rock was haunted by some fell creature that would never let them live in peace. So first off, yes, this is sexual imagery. He's coating himself in butter, getting naked, and then slipping inside the cleft. It is what it is. And of course, Lann did do something sexual. He slipped his bloodline into the bloodline of the Casterlys. Now, in terms of Lannister parallels, this first set of ideas is all about Tyrion. Tyrion famously was put in charge of the drains and cisterns of Casterly Rock when he was young. And he did a good job. He made them all flow. So that's similar to Lann being the master of the clefts and crevasses of the rock. Now, Tyrion, while in King's Landing, definitely spreads rumors and tricks to suss out the truth and deceive people, and that's all very Lann the Clever-like. Tyrion also rigs the snare and deadfall of the chain and the wildfire at the Battle of the Blackwater. So that's very Lann-like. Instead of using, battle strength, he's using his wits and he's using deception. And again, he's rigging snares. Tyrion is also the one who thinks about how Lann still haunts the Rock to this day. Lann is compared to a demon, and Tyrion is a demon in a bunch of ways. He's called Monkey Demon, he's called Imp, and Imp is a demon. And when he goes to Tobo Mott to have a new helmet forged, Tobo's like, let me make you a demon helm. And even the idea of Lann howling like a demon evokes Tyrion the monkey demon because monkeys howl. And there were those demonic monkeys that Victarion encountered over in Slaver's Bay. So yeah, George must think that monkey howling is demonic, it would seem. And then just as Lann stole the inheritance of the Casterlys, and maybe of Garth's children according to some tales, Tyrion is, in a way, set up to steal the inheritance of Jaime, who is the firstborn. Well, technically Cersei is firstborn, but she's a woman, so she couldn't possibly inherit. Now, this is only possible because Jaime joins the Kingsguard, so it's not really Tyrion stealing it. But in order to get that inheritance of Casterly Rock, he might have to kind of steal it back, and that would mimic Lann. And then, of course, there's the idea that Tyrion may be a Targaryen. He may be Aerys and Joanna's son. And if that's true, then this is an even better parallel to Lann, who is an entirely different bloodline, effectively stealing Casterly Rock from the Casterlys. So this would be Aerys stealing Casterly Rock from the Lannisters by having a child with Joanna, who inherits. And of course, if Lann the Clever is from the Great Empire of the Dawn, who seemingly was an empire of dragon lords, the ones who came before Valyria, then the idea of Tyrion Targaryen could potentially be an even tighter parallel to Lann, the Dragon Lord, or at least Dragon Lord descendant person from the Great Empire of the Dawn. Other tellers prefer other versions of the tale. In one, Lann uses the cleft to fill the rock with mice, rats, and other vermin, thereby driving out the Casterlys. In another, he smuggles a pride of lions inside, and Lord Casterly and his sons are all devoured, after which Lann claims his lordship's wife and daughters for himself. So this is interesting. It kind of makes Lann sound like a skin changer. He's sending in the vermin and the mice, as if he's some sort of beast master. And then he's making the lions turn on the Casterlys. How's he doing that? How's he smuggling a pride of lions inside the rock? Well, I'm tempted to say that these are actually older legends about lion skin changers sort of clinging to the rock, and that they're from the days of the Casterlys. That's certainly a phenomenon we see George mimic from real-world history, where older myths become adopted by later immigrants and conquerors. Because, as we just discussed, Corlys, son of Castor, is seemingly the first man and the one first encountering the children of the forest in this cave. So he would be the lion skin changer. And this legend does sound like a specific inversion of the original Corlys lion finding the vein of gold in Casterly Rock legend. So this time, the lions kill the Casterlys instead of the Casterlys killing the lions. Then Lann adopts the wives and daughters of the Casterlys, just as Corlys adopted the cubs of the lion parents that he slew. Even the reference to vermin in the tunnels of the rocks could be a reference to squirrels, and thus the squirrel people, the children of the forest, living in the rock, as they would have been when Corlys got there. And whether the vermin referred to children of the forest or not, it does seem that the children of the forest lived there. Now, it could also be that Lann is also a lion skin changer, and that this thing is a big lion skin changer war. Because after all, that happened in the north with wolf skin changers. It happened twice, actually. The Starks fought the War of the Wolves versus Gavin Greywolf and his wargs. And then they also fought the War for Sea Dragon Point against the Warg King and his Greenseers. So yeah, Lann versus the Casterlys may have been a lion skin changer battle. And it's also possible that if Lann is a Great Empire of the Dawn person, that he might have skin changer or Greenseer magic, because there are some clues about that. And then with a quick edit cut in here, seamless transition, I got a tip from Sean, our friend Sean, hero with 1,000 voices. Give him a sub if you haven't already, who reminds me that there was a prominent lion civil war in the history of House Lannister, which is of course the Lannisters versus the Rains of Castamere and the Tarbecks of Tarbeck Hall. That's where the song Rains of Castamere comes from, of course. Very moving, very sad, and you'll notice that the Rains coat of arms is a red lion on a silver field, which is almost like a bastion bastard branch inversion of the House Lannister golden lion on red coat of arms. The famous last words of the reigns immortalized in song: "In a coat of gold or a coat of red, a lion still has claws, and mine are long and sharp, my lord, as long and sharp as yours." Those words really do make it sound like these houses are fighting a lion skin changer war, lion on lion. And then continuing with the lion civil war theme, we see Tyrion and Cersei fighting in King's Landing, and then Jaime and Cersei fighting in King's Landing, Tyrion and Jaime a little bit on Tyrion's way out. Certainly Tywin and Tyrion are fighting until Tyrion kills him, and if Tyrion helps Dany invade Westeros, as it seems like he's going to, then he may end up on the opposite side of a battlefield from Jaime and or Cersei. So yeah, a lion skin changer war could make sense between Lann and the Casterlys. And again, I'll bring up the idea from the first video that the lion that Corlys originally slew to claim the gold mine may have been his brother, who was turned into a lion in later mythology. And thus this entire thing may have begun with a lion on lion civil war. Also, this just in, the Rains of Castamere live in a castle called Castamere. They are an ancient house of First Men descent, and so there is no way that that is a coincidence that George named Casterly Rock and Castamere such similar names, and they're both First Men houses. So hello, secret origin of the Rains. Maybe that's the name of the brother Corlys slew, Rain or Ryan, something like that, Raincaster, some sort of storm god. And whether that's true or not, the larger point remains. The Rains of Castamere are probably connected to the same Castor that Corlys, son of Castor, is connected to, and that means they might have been lion skin changers too, which means that when Tywin Lannister eliminated the line of the Rains of Castamere, he was just finishing up the work of Lann the Clever, exterminating all the lion skin changer houses of the West. Now, I don't know quite what to make of the immaculate conceptions in this next passage, so you tell me. The bawdiest of the stories has Lann stealing in night after night to have his way with the Casterly maidens whilst they sleep. In 9 months' time, these maids all give birth to golden-haired children while still insisting they never had carnal knowledge of a man. So this could be a reference to Castor and Pollux, because in many versions of the story, Castor is the divine son of Zeus, while Pollux is not. And if you know anything about Zeus, he's a little tricksy in the impregnation, if you will. And in this case, he impregnated Leda, the mother of Castor and Pollux, by disguising himself as a swan. So yeah, there's a trickery element in the conception of Castor, and maybe that's what this is referring to. So as I mentioned earlier, many of the founding fathers of these great houses of Westeros have like hundreds of children. And there may be an explanation for this having to do with the apparent fact that many of the early kings and lords of the First Men were green seers and skin changers, and they were having a lot of children in hopes of having one of them that would be born with the gift. This would actually be in the interest of the entire clan, because having a skin changer or green seer as the leader of your clan makes you more powerful. So think about Vaemir Sixskins. He is getting as many women pregnant as possible. I won't say the R word, but it's definitely the R word. It's disgusting and reprehensible, but the whole point of it is to try to have a child with the gift, and he's not been successful so far. And so when we think of that disgusting custom of the Lord's right of the first night, prima nocta, which gives the Lord of a land such as Roose Bolton the right to ride in on the wedding night of a couple getting married in his land, and then he gets to sleep with the woman first before the husband. The whole point of that is to basically have a lottery ticket, another lottery ticket at having a skin changer child. So yeah, this isn't my theory, but I do think it's solid. I think this custom dates all the way back to the First Men and the Green Seer and Skin Changer Kings trying to have children with the gift. So the idea of Lann having 100 daughters and 100 sons and multiplying and filling the rock with his children, well, that could be evidence that Lann was a skin changer king. Or again, these could be older legends associated with Corlys attached to the rock that later became attached to Lann. All right, it's time to answer the question, is Lann the Clever a filthy, tree-cutting Andal underneath all that gold? Is he an Andal? Beneath the gold, the bitter Andal. And actually, it's a little bit warm. Cut tape All right, so the Maesters finish up that land section about all the various different ideas about his origins by saying, well, who the f knows about any of that? But somehow, someway, we know that sometime during the Age of Heroes, the Casterlys vanish from the chronicles, and the hitherto unknown Lannisters appear in their place, ruling large portions of the Westerlands from beneath Casterly Rock. So there you go. Lann the Clever shows up, usurps the Casterlys. We knew that. And we also know that if Lann was an Andal, he probably wasn't a magical person. We really have no evidence for any of the Andals being magical. And famously, they have like the one religion in the story that definitely isn't magical, although those archetypes are powerful. And in particular, we know that skin changing and green seeing are the purview of the Children of the Forest and the first men who intermarried with the Children of the Forest. Ergo, in the Lann is an Andal scenario, all of those magical stories about Lann that sound like skin changing do probably predate Lann and are more likely referring to the days of the Casterlys and their lion skin changing ways. So there are, of course, theories that the Andal invasion was actually much earlier than the Maesters believe, which I sort of jokingly refer to as ancient Andal theory. And I recently made a 40-minute video called Ancient Andals Debunked. This is all very playful. Not really debunking, but just making my argument for why I think the Andal invasion happened when it did, i.e. at least a couple thousand years after the Long Night, and definitely not before. So, lost my place in the sentence structure there, but the point is... What was the point? That I do actually think Lann might be an Andal, even without Ancient Andal theory. So I don't know what kind of fun and games the Ancient Andals folks have with the Lann the Clever story, but I'm here to say that he actually fits very well as a pre-conquest Andal. Because one of the things that really jumped out to me as we dove deep into all this Andal history on the 5-hour Andal livestream that we did a few months ago is the fact that some Andal captains apparently were sailing around the coast of Westeros long before the Andal invasion. Unlike the first men, the Andals were seafarers, and the more adventurous of their captains knew the Dornish coasts well, and were wont to say that there was naught to be found there but snakes, scorpions, and sand. Small wonder then that comparatively few of the invaders bent their oars southward when there were richer, greener lands far closer at hand, just across the narrow sea from Andalos itself. Alright, so two things here. One, the Andals were already familiar with Westeros and picked the Vale for their invasion because it was ripe for the plucking. And that's specifically said elsewhere. Check out the Andals videos. But more importantly for our purpose today, the more adventurous of the Andal captains are the ones sailing past the southern coast of Dorne, which famously has nowhere to land. So if they're sailing past the southern coast of Dorne, where are they sailing to? Well, the obvious answers would be Old Town and Lannisport, who are two of the very oldest trading towns or cities in Westeros. And remember, Lannisport actually predates Casterly Rock. So yeah, these are the two places that the more adventurous Andal captains would be going to, Old Town and Lannisport, or whatever they called Lannisport before Lann got there. It's called Land's Port now, but as we read, Corlos, son of Casterly, came from the town that exists at the spot of Lannisport today when he went and found the gold mine in Casterly Rock. So this all fits together pretty well. The more adventurous of the Andal captains are sailing past Dorne to Old Town and Lannisport, and Lann the Clever is called an adventurer from the east. So as you can see, the idea of Lann being one of these early Andals is very plausible. It would make a lot of sense. He would have been a sea captain and a merchant who made a good deal in Lannisport. Maybe he got the current Lord Casterly over a barrel in some trade deals or some gambling debts even. Or maybe he just became wealthy through trade and then settled down in the town. And perhaps he married the daughter of the current Lord Casterly when he didn't have a son. And in doing so, slept with the Casterly maidens and slipped his bloodline into the bloodline of the Casterlys. And eventually they rebranded from Casterly to Lannister. And by the way, both of those names are drawn from the Lancasters from the War of the Roses. Lancasters and Yorks, Lannisters and Starks. I'm far from the first to point that out. Hopefully you've heard that before. But the point is, Lancaster. Lann and Caster, Corlos, son of Caster. And if we're thinking about the in-world evolution of the name, perhaps it was originally Lann Casterly, and then it just got shortened to Lancaster and then Lannister. So let me know in the comments what you think. But yeah, I think Lann as an early Andal adventurer makes a lot of sense and is pretty solid. And I also like that it fits with the notion that all of the magical sounding myths about Lann are actually from the skin-changing Casterlys, because I think that's really the most sensible way to interpret those myths. On the other hand, Lion Skin Changer War sounds pretty cool too, so maybe Lann was a magical person. And if he's not a local firstman, then that means he must be from the great empire of the Dawn, and thus related to the first dragon lords that predate Valyria. This is close as I could get. So it does kind of have the Lannister colors, so we'll roll with that as we talk about Lann of the Dawn. So let's start with the hair color. The Lannisters famously, I joked about it earlier, but much is made of the fact, even the kids know this, it's gold, not blonde. Those third cousins and counterfeits in Lannisport might have blonde hair, but the Lannisters, it's always described as gold too. George is very faithful about it. So the Andals are known for being fair-haired, which generally means blonde, straw, flaxen, etc. But it's conceivable that the gold hair could be an Andal thing, but maybe George is calling out gold as opposed to blonde as part of the hint that Lann the Clever is from the great empire of the Dawn, because Dany's vision of the gemstone emperors, who have gemstone eyes that match the dynasties of the great empire of the Dawn, who hold swords of pale fire and root for Dany to wake the dragon, well, those kingly ghosts have hair of gold and silver and platinum white. And even though silver is by far the most common hair color among the Targaryens, they do occasionally have some platinum white or a bit of gold. Olenna Targaryen famously had a golden lock in her hair. That does kind of fit with the overall vibe of the gold hair of the Lannisters. It almost seems like a magical trait. And it does have a magical backstory. Of course, Lann stole the fire of the sun to color his hair. That's why it's so gold, and that's why all the Lannisters always have gold hair. Now, the idea of stealing the fire of the sun to give yourself a golden crown, essentially, is kind of getting at the heart of what the golden crown of kings is supposed to symbolize, which is the divine authority of the sun god. But stealing that authority for yourself, then it becomes sort of a Promethean or Luciferian themed story, where Lann the Clever is a trickster hero, or anti-hero, and he's stealing fire from the heavens, just like Prometheus. And as viewers of the channel will know, this Luciferian stealing the fire of the gods thing is a key part of the Azor Ahai monomyth, and we see it replicated all over the place. Hugh Ahai, for example, has 7 stars taken down from the sky by the Father and made into his crown. That wasn't a stealing, that was sanctioned by the Father. So again, Lann is the trickster version of this. He's stealing the authority of the gods. And that connects him, again, to the Azor Ahai monomyth, and that would make more sense if he is from the great empire of the Dawn. Okay, so next point, I mentioned this earlier, but again, if Tyrion is a Targaryen, if he is Aerys' son, then this could find a very strong parallel with the idea of Lann being descended of the dragon people from the great empire of the Dawn. That doesn't mean Lann flew a dragon to Casterly Rock, because that's not really in the myth, but he would still carry that dragon association. And more importantly, there are a lot of clues that people from the great empire of the Dawn were skin changers and green seers. This may be part of how the dragon bond was created, and there's just a lot of evidence in general. Check out my Was the Bloodstone Emperor a Green Seer stream that I did with Grey Waste Tim. So we've got 2 ideas. One, Tyrion Targaryen could parallel Lann from the great empire of the Dawn, and Lann from the great empire of the Dawn might have some of the magical powers needed for a lion skin changer war, or really for any of the more magical sounding ideas about Lann the Clever to really have been worked by Lann the Clever. Next point, Casterly Rock has a lot of dragon symbolism. It's a cave full of gold. So think of Smaug's cave from The Hobbit, obviously, or really any Norse myth about dragons guarding hoards of gold, such as the legend of Fafnir, from which George fashioned a large part of Tyrion's story. Fafnir is a dwarf who found an apparently cursed hoard of gold, sat over it so long that he turned into a dragon. And Tyrion is a dwarf living in a cave full of gold who may be a dragon. Like I said, he may be Tyrion Targaryen. And even if he's not, George does use the idea of cursed Lannister gold related to dragons when he mentions that there's this Valyrian prophecy that the gold of Casterly Rock would somehow bring about the doom of the Valyrians. And I do think that gold of Casterly Rock was a part of the doom was an inside job theory. I made a video about this, but the 10-second version is that Aenar Targaryen was selling Valyrian steel to people in Westeros, one of whom was the Lord of Casterly that they sold Bright Roar for. Then they took the gold from Bright Roar, used it to hire faceless men, and the doom was an inside job. All of which to say, George is using Fafnir mythology in Ice and Fire, one of which is Tyrion, who has a lot of Fafnir symbolism, and that just sort of enhances the general dragon vibes of Casterly Rock. Furthermore, we might notice that this theme of greed and gold from Norse myth, which finds its place in Lord of the Rings as well, with Smaug, and also Gollum with the golden ring, like we mentioned earlier. Well, we see that theme with the Lannisters and their gold. So that doesn't really mean Lann is from the Great Empire of the Dawn, but I'm just trying to show you how there's a lot of Norse dragon mythology that informs the world building of Casterly Rock, and the Lannisters in particular. Alright, so next Great Empire of the Dawn clue, those flaming swords that Jaime and Brienne wield in Jaime's dream. They're in the bowels of Casterly Rock, and they've got these flaming swords of silvery blue flame that give off pale light. That compares pretty well to the swords of pale fire that Dany sees in the hands of the Great Empire of the Dawn Gemstone Emperors. So maybe Lann the Clever was descended from those Gemstone Emperors and came to Casterly Rock. And then going back a bit, it occurs to me that the fact that two different Lannisters tried to sail to Valyria is another way that George could be implying a connection between the Lannisters and Dragonlords. So we got a couple Lannisters sailing to Valyria, never coming back. Maybe Lann sailed from the first Dragonlord Empire, the Great Empire of the Dawn, to Lannisport and never came back to the Great Empire of the Dawn because he stayed in Lannisport and married Lord Casterly's daughter. Or maybe he coated himself in butter and put mice and rats in the... It's probably not that. Then the next point is the geography, and I mentioned this in the intro, and I really don't need to go into much more detail. I did make whole videos about the evidence that the Grey King is from the Great Empire of the Dawn, as well as the first Hightowers being from the Great Empire of the Dawn, and the first Danes being from the Great Empire of the Dawn. So you can check out all those videos for that story. But again, the simple point is that the Great Empire of the Dawn seems to have sailed to Westeros, probably across the Sunset Sea, and then just arrived on the southern half of the west coast of Westeros. Now, the timing of the theoretical Great Empire of the Dawn colonization of southwest Westeros does potentially line up with the dates for the first Lannister kings showing up in the historical records. That's supposedly going on in the Age of Heroes, which the Maesters say is basically all the time right before the Long Night. I think it's the time right after the Long Night. Check out my Timeline Heresy videos about that. But yeah, the timing generally works out. If Lann was from the Great Empire of the Dawn, that doesn't require any rewriting of history. So there you go. That's basically the case for the Lannisters come from the Great Empire of the Dawn. And no, I don't expect this to be a thing that matters for the end of the story. This is really just, we're deep in the funsies, world building for funsies realm here. And that's really true whether Lann is from the Great Empire of the Dawn or if he's an early Andal adventurer. Either way, I don't expect some reveal, you know, in A Dream of Spring or whatever. So these are the clues we have. I do think the Landal's theory makes a little more sense, but really either could work, and let me know in the comments. And then I've got one other thing pertaining to the gold hair of the Lannisters. If Lann is an Andal, then why is his hair so gold? Well, maybe the golden hair is actually a Casterly thing. And like everything else, Lann stole it. You know what I mean? He adopted the lion symbolism from the Casterlys, so maybe his descendants got the gold hair from the Casterly maiden that he married, and eventually it just became part of the Lann mythology. And an even cooler possibility is that the gold hair comes from the children of the forest that Corlos, son of Castor, apparently married. The one that Bran sees has hair that's a tangle of red and gold, autumn colors. So maybe Corlos, son of Castor, is already fair-haired and got some of that gold hair from the children of the forest. After all, Rowan Goldtree, specifically known for her golden hair, and all of her mythology seems like code for child of the forest. So that's pretty fun. Maybe Lann didn't have golden hair. Maybe that came from the Casterlys too. And maybe it even came from the children of the forest. Thank you very much for watching. I've been David Lightbringer, and if you enjoy my videos, please do hit the subscribe button so you never miss them. Make sure the notification bell is set to all. And YouTube will change that on you. So even if you think it is set to all, it might not be. Go ahead and check. And if you really want to ensure the survival and growth of this channel and get involved with all the fun, then check out our Patreon campaign. That helps me stay independent from the pressures of YouTube, which is good. That's why we're doing the long form content that we do here. And I'm also resisting the YouTube push to let the AI put way more ads in all your videos. Don't know if you've noticed that recently, but your videos have a lot more ads. A lot of them do. That's because YouTube is putting a lot of pressure on content creators to let the AI do it. And when the AI does it, they put in like just a ton of ads. So yeah, thanks to my Patreon supporters for keeping me somewhat independent of all that pressure. And then of course, we're giving away t-shirts and, you know, reading people's names out and giving people access to the Discord, fun stuff like that. So thanks for watching the video. I'll see you every Sunday at 3 p.m. Pacific for Starry Wisdom Sunday, and every week on Wednesday or Thursday, apparently that's my new schedule, with a produced video. Cheers, and I'll see you next time.